Hola, you are listening to First Gen Healing, a podcast on Latinx healing and awakening journeys. My name is Priscila Luna. I am your host, and I'm so excited for today's episode because we have our first couple ever. Yay! I'm actually a little nervous because I haven't had two people on at the same time, but I'm really excited to talk about this topic, which before I introduce it, hola Coralia, hola Nefi, ¿cómo están?
Hola,
Hello.
gracias for having us on the podcast.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you for having us. It's an honor to be here, and we're excited, and we're really excited with the topic that we're going to talk about.
Yeah, so let's let the listeners in on that. So I was thinking about this phase in the healing and awakening journey where there's a desire to change or for change. And then when you start to actually put in the work and start to see the results, it can create some distance between who you were, who you're becoming. And then when you look around, you're like, oh, and what about them, right? Like, what about my family or my friends or even my significant other? So, that's kind of why I wanted to bring you guys in because I think that it would be such an important topic to talk about. Like, what happens when you're in a relationship? What happens when you are maybe the first one going, let's say, and doing the things, or when you're seeing your partner change in front of you and you're like, whoa, like, are they also going to change so much that I won't be able to catch up? I would love to start talking about how was that initial phase, let's say, for either of you.
I guess I'll start it because I feel that during this journey, I was the one that kind of started. And I think it started back, I want to say about like anywhere between 5 to 6 years ago. I just felt something that was like I wanted more, and I think one of the biggest things that I was noticing is also during our relationship during that time was that, we weren't, I would say we weren't in a bad place, but we weren't in a great place. There was a lot of external factors that was affecting our relationship. And it was getting to the point where I felt that I was trying too hard, so I was trying to help Kori with trying to, be more positive. And then I was noticing that the harder I was trying and the more I was doing, the more I felt that I was pushing her away. And it got to the point where I started kind of like looking more into like the self-healing and self-developing and things like that. And one of the things that I came across that really stuck out in my mind was that I read it where it said, the best thing you could do for your partner is to work on yourself. And then that's when it kind of clicked, and I was like, okay, I'm trying all these things for her, but what do I need to do better for myself? And I feel that was kind of the starting point of my healing journey and kind of what got me into it. So it's kind of funny how, like, in a relationship, even though it was something that I wanted to do for her, it ended up being something completely different, and it ended up being more about myself first. So trying to heal or fix, quote unquote, fix myself before I could help Kori in what she needed help with. So for me, that was kind of the origin of my healing journey.
How interesting. And like, I guess that requires a level of self-awareness. And I'm even thinking like ego. I don't know if at any point your ego played into thinking, well, if she's the one that needs to have the help, why would I need to change?
I think it did at some point, because I did feel like, like kind of like you mentioned, like I was like, oh, I'm doing this for her, I'm doing this for her. And but in reality, it's just like, what is that? That is your ego. You're doing something for someone else, when in reality it shouldn't be that way. So I definitely do feel that did play a big part of it. And I did have to kind of go through like that what people call like the ego death, like really getting away from that mindset and that type of feeling, because ultimately, that's what was kind of standing in the way, I feel. And then once I was able to kind of get past that, I was like, no, it's not about her, it's more about me. It was a really eye-opening. I'm like, oh wow, like I have a lot of stuff I need to do, and how can I pour into her cup if my cup isn't all full? So that was a big big change that I had to change in my mindset to be able to actually do what to start that journey.
Oof, that's so important. Okay, we're gonna come back to that, but I want to bring in Coralia because I would love to know, at that point, did you perceive even that Nefi was going through that and kind of like going within? Because it sounds like it would push you away when he tried to help you. So whether you want to share maybe like putting yourself back in those shoes, or maybe now looking back, how do you interpret that time?
I think definitely at that time I was just going through my own issues that had nothing to do with him per se, but feeling the anxiety and just not being feeling like the world around me was just crumbling down. So I felt alone even though I had a family, even though I
Mm-hmm.
had friends, and it was hard for me to really see what he was trying to do for me because I felt like the only person
Mm-hmm.
that could really take me out of that space where I was myself. And
Ooh, yeah.
he was trying. He would show up to work, and my job at the time was like what I call like toxic. It was very
Mm.
heavy for me, and so he would show up at work, and he would try to lift up my spirits and give me like that positivity to keep me going for the rest of the day. And it just wasn't, nothing on him. It was just me. And
Yeah.
so
Mm.
when he started to kind of not ignore me, but focus on himself, I noticed that. I'm like, okay, he's not asking me all the time. He's not, you know, um, trying to be there all the time. So what is he doing? And then I would see him. He would go in the morning. He would go running. He would start,
Mm.
just doing things on his for himself that had absolutely nothing to do with me, but that caught my attention. And I'm like, wait, like
Yeah.
we don't all have to be in this, horrible little dark hole. I can see him
Mm-hmm.
trying to get out of there. And so that gave me a little push like, okay, like it's not as bad as I probably think it is. I am able to
Mm.
kind of get away from this and, following his example. But he did have to
Mm-hmm.
kind of, like you mentioned, push me away to the side so that I can actually notice that.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I'm just like sitting in so much gratitude already that you guys are willing to share these parts of your journeys, because I just pictured like my tias and my tios, and the way that they would describe this would be so different.
Oh,
They
yeah.
would not describe it with so much self-awareness. They probably would just talk negatively about each other. And it makes me emotional because like then that creates maybe like a toxic cycle that no one really knows how to get out of. And I sense that a veces ahí es donde se apaga la gente, you
Mhm.
know?
Oh, yeah.
Like they become complacent, and then they become mad at each other, and then there's kind of like it's like the point of no return, but they don't know how to get out, so they stay there, you
Yeah,
know? And they
exactly.
just kind of live that out ongoingly. So
Yeah.
how powerful that like Nefi, that you had the courage to kind of set a boundary in a way and say, okay, what I'm doing isn't helping. Let me help myself. And
Mhm.
then Coralia, that you weren't. I mean, I don't know exactly right, like how you processed it, but you could have been like rencorosa in a way and been like, oh, so now you're gonna focus on you and not on me. You
Right.
know, like you could take it in such a different way and create a negative experience out of something that thankfully now turned out to be positive, you know?
Yeah. And it's definitely hard, I think now we can look back on it and talk about it and reflect and point out the things that we learned. But definitely at that time, you start questioning a lot of things. You're like, okay, is this the end? I think by this point we were married, I don't know, maybe like 12,
Yeah.
11 years or something like that. So it wasn't nothing
Mm,
um, too short, I would say. We had come a long way,
yeah.
but a lot of the marriages do end around that stage where it's like, okay, 10 years
Mm,
later, 12 years later, and then there's a divorce. And so even all these things start coming up into your head, and you're like, okay, is this it? Like, is this where it ends? Like,
right.
where do we go from here? But I think, to kind of pat ourselves on the on the shoulder and the back, we've never been that couple to just, okay, all of a sudden this is the end, okay, we're done. We've always tried to
Mm,
find and talk about it and see where we are missing each other and try to come back to that place
mhm,
so that we can then continue on that journey together.
And also
mm.
to add to
Qué
that, like,
padre.
like I know we're kind of speaking freely about it, and but to really like like I don't want to downplay, like it was really, it was a bad space. You know, I
Mhm.
feel we were both kind of getting to that point where like Corey said, like, wow, this could potentially be the end, but there's always something inside of it that's like, no, like keep going. You know, there's something, that little push that's
Mm.
just like, this is not it. Like, you know, keep going. And for me, that was
Yeah.
like a big motivation, because there was a couple conversations like that, was like, well, if this is not working, then, you know, let's see what our options are, type thing. And, you know, at first, like for me,
Yeah.
especially, like it was hard to hear that. I was like, wow, like, could this be it? But I knew deep down inside, and that's, I think that's the hardest thing to explain. Like deep down inside, I knew it wasn't us. You know, it was external factors that was affecting
Mm.
our relationship, that was coming home to our home. But deep down, I just knew, I was like, no,
Mhm.
this can't be it. And just having that faith, and that thing inside of me to say keep going, that what's
Yeah.
made the difference of what path we took.
Yeah. Oof. So maybe we can come back a little bit to then what you said of like, I'm trying to pour into her cup, but like I need to pour into mine, before I can do that. I'm wondering initially when you felt this and you started to pull away a little bit, what were kind of the first initial things that you started to do?
It started off physical. You know, I was like, okay, let me start, you know,
Mm.
exercising. Let me start being a little bit more healthier and things like that. But I think the bigger picture was like, I started, the things that I started viewing online. Like I started kind of looking at more like self help and more like spirituality type things. I started also seeing like shows that were a little bit different, and I think that's what was
Mm.
kind of more of like helped me down that path, because you know, you could work out, you could feel better and good and all that stuff, but that wasn't it. Like for me, like I knew it was much deeper than that. So that was around the time when I
Mhm.
really started learning, and really diving more into that spirituality. I started, you know, started to learn about like meditation and things like that. So I think those were probably the main thing. It started physically, and then it started kind of evolving into more
Mm.
spiritual.
Okay. Did you at that point already see it like finding your home within yourself, or no, that came like later?
Oh yeah, that came later. Yeah, I think at the
Okay.
beginning it was more just trying to just be positive, trying to be happy, not let certain negativities bring me down. So it's more about just being positive. But that, and then eventually that turned into more of that self growth, and that inner, I guess, inner work that I started doing.
I see. And then Coralia, when you started to see some of those changes, because sometimes when you're in that dark spot or space, you could even resent that or look at it through a negative lens of like, oh, he's so annoying, look at him trying to speak and communicate well, like, or no say,
Yeah.
like, or get up early, like I think that sometimes when we're not ready to take the step outside of, where we're at, like it could be looked at as something negative. Do you think that that was initially how you perceived it, or did it even like feel like pressure that you had to do
I
something?
think it was separate. I think, I'm an introvert, so I welcomed the being left alone part. I was okay,
Okay.
just being like, okay, he's out running. I could just not talk to anybody. So that in that
Mm.
aspect, it didn't bother me at all. What I did start to notice was that because he was out doing what he was doing, or when we would talk, it wasn't just about the negativity that was going on, or that I was bringing home from my workplace, or that was happening amongst us. We were able to kind of step away for a little bit, and then he would tell me, oh, I saw
Mhm.
this post online and they're talking about this, and we're like, oh, okay, that's interesting, and I would just listen. There was
Mhm.
never like, oh, tell me more, I'm so intrigued. But I always, I think
Mhm.
we respect each other in that aspect, that we will still listen to each other when we have something to say. And I started noticing
Mm.
those the different topics. Before, it was just football that we could really talk about, and you know, um, not much, like just like random little things. But then he started talking more
Mhm.
about like, yeah, little meditations, and oh, like take a look at this video. And so it opened up my eyes to also a different world that I didn't really know existed, right? I was still in
Mm.
that negative space,
Yeah.
like just hating my life. But it allowed me to kind of
Yeah.
forget my own troubles and focus on something
Mhm.
completely different. And it was interesting when he was saying, he would also go out and train with our dog, and he'd be like, "Oh, look at the trick I showed her, or look at this new, like way of training." And we were able to kind of find, again, like how I mentioned earlier, where we were missing each other, we were able to find ourselves back through there. Not necessarily, oh, now he's a different person. Like, we're good now.
Yeah.
But it was like, okay, like, we are going through our stuff, but that doesn't mean that we hate each other and want nothing to do with each other. I'm still interested in what he does, and likewise. And we were able to connect
Mm,
with those topics and those things that he was doing.
I see. So it kind of sounds like it was helpful that maybe you didn't fully understand, but you were still open to what he brought
Yeah.
into the relationship.
Yes, absolutely.
I think like sometimes these journeys as Latinos especially, like they can feel a little bit alienating because you're starting to navigate within or become more emotionally intelligent. Did you have support or friendships, family that maybe like validated it, or was this something that you were going through on your own?
Yeah, it's definitely something I started going through on my own because I do feel that when you start kind of going through that journey, like it sounds it is out of the box thinking, right? And I think I
Mhm.
mentioned it to a few friends and something, and they're like, "Oh, okay," kind of like that. What is that? Like that weirdness, I guess you could call
Yeah.
it. So I started noticing that, and even with family, and I was just like, okay, well, maybe this is something I should just do on my own to start off. So definitely at the beginning, it was more on it was more isolating, and it was more me spending time with my own thoughts and what I was feeling because of that. And I
Mhm.
feel that it was a little isolating, but I knew that it like as I was kind of going through it, like it was feeling good, like I was feeling better, not just about our relationship, but also about myself. I'm like, oh, like this feels good. This
Mhm.
this this is something positive. This is something that I can continue long term. But even like talking to like friends and family, it was I was kind of non-existent. It was just like, yeah, and not obviously friends like that haven't been through that journey, they kind of don't understand it. And I feel that at that time, there wasn't a lot of people that were open to it as well. So it was
Yeah.
it was kind of lonely, especially at the beginning. So I was more, just
Mhm.
trying to find people online, trying to following certain Instagram pages that resonated with me or that I resonated with, and finding kind of
Mhm.
like external, I guess, people to really help with my journey. Because yeah, at the beginning I didn't really talk to many people about it because it did sound a
Mhm.
little, not, I don't want to say crazy, but a little out of this world type thinking. So yeah, it was
Yeah.
a little hard at the beginning to kind of go through that, but over time
Yeah.
I feel that I started seeing more people talking about it. And once Corey was kind of more getting more into it, that's when I started opening up more and speaking more about it to friends and family.
It's so interesting, isn't it? How, like, at first, it's for many of us, it starts with online people, like it's just people who start to say things that you're like, "Ooh, okay, they're on the same channel," or wavelength that I'm on. But yeah, I just find that interesting, and I'm so thankful that we have the internet. Because if not, imagine like going through this and
Hmm.
not even finding that. I think it would
Yeah.
Yeah.
be an isolating
Maybe more
experience.
lonelier.
So, Corey, I want to maybe ask you here, was there any point where you did feel that pressure to like, okay, it's been a few months, I'm seeing these changes, I'm starting to feel like I need to do something of my situation? Or was it more like inspirational? What was kind of like your feeling that started to get you on opening that door and being like, maybe I want in on whatever's happening here?
I think one thing I do want to note is that this, what we're talking about, happened through a span of not months or weeks, it was years. And so,
Mm,
at the very beginning, yeah, again, I was lost. I didn't know, he started doing his own thing, and I was like, okay, like I'll continue trying to figure out. And there came a point where I was trying to do what I thought I needed to do, which was, I left my job, I changed my environment, we moved closer to family, we kind of just started fresh, if you will, from what we were used to.
okay.
And I thought that that was going to be it, right? If my job sucks
Mm.
so much and I left it, then surely I'd feel better. You know, if the
Yeah.
the city where we were in, we were no longer happy. If we moved, then surely I would feel better. And
Mm.
we did those things, and I did feel better. It was, our relationship was even better. Like things were starting to come up. But then at some point,
Okay.
and I still remember it vividly, like, sitting out in my backyard and looking at the home we had purchased and just seeing my son happy and how our relationship was beginning to like go better. I'm like, there's still something missing. Like, and I don't know what that is anymore,
Mm.
right? I've tried buying the shoes. I've
Mhm.
tried, we bought the house of our dreams. We changed jobs. Like, what more could I possibly want? And I remember just sitting there. I'm like, I'm grateful for what I have, but there's something there. Like, I'm like, no sé qué es. Like, what is it? And
Mhm.
surely nobody would be able to tell me other than myself. And
Mm.
I kind of just sat with those feelings, trying to figure out, doing research online. Maybe I need to study a new career. Maybe I need to do like, whatever
Oh
else
my
that I
gosh,
needed to
yes.
do to find that missing piece because it felt something was lacking. And
Yeah.
again, through this whole time, he's still going, through his journey. He's learning. He's um, just continuing on that journey. And I hadn't, up until this point, done anything, other than try to support him as best I could. But there
Mhm.
did come a point where he came up to me and he said that he wanted to go to a like
A
a
retreat.
retreat to
Mm. Mhm.
just kind of like for 3 days and kind of find yourself, right? And he invited me, and I'm like, no thanks. I was like, I don't know what I need, but I know that a cult is not it. And um he
Not a cult. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh.
Yeah, because I was like, it's probably a cult. That's just the mentality I had. But
Yeah.
at the same time, I said, you go. I mean, let me know where you're at, so just in case I need to go find you. But I'm not interested. And he did. He did end up going. He came back, and he came back with a whole bunch of knowledge. Right? He was like a different person. He was telling me
Mm.
stories, like everything that happened. Um, what he was able to accomplish in that retreat. And
Mhm.
there was a conversation that we had because he was so excited, right? He was like, yeah, like this is it's life changing. I'm like, wow, like 3 days, like that's crazy, right?
Ooh, okay, so it was
um
3 days. Yeah.
it was three
Was it
days
somewhere else or local?
It
Where
was
was it?
in
Yeah, it was in
Texas.
Texas. Yeah, so just a
Oh,
little
okay.
bit of background about that. It's a retreat. It's like a spiritual retreat. It's called Awakening, and I think that's
Mhm.
why Corey thought it was a cool.
Mm.
But yeah, so it was it was out of state. So even that was a little hard as well because we don't
Yeah.
really spend a lot of time apart, especially stuff like that. So even with me, I was
Mm.
like even like it's funny to say that, but even like asking Corey like, "Can I go?" was like a big deal for me because I was like, I never really do stuff like that on my own, but I knew that I felt
Mm.
that calling to go to there because I felt that it was going to make a
Yeah.
difference, and it did. So a little precursor, like during that retreat, I learned a lot, and they were having this promotion, and they were like, "Hey, we have another one coming up in California, which is where we're from," and
Mm.
so I thought about it. I was like, I know that Corey's gonna like this. I know that she could benefit from it. But the way her mindset was at the time was like, no, it's a cold and all these other things. But
Yeah.
I felt that calling to just like buy the tickets. I even like talked to one of my friends who actually went with me to that retreat, and
Mm.
yeah, she gave me really good advice. She was because I wanted to buy it and just kind of give it to her as a gift, but then what my friend said was like, "Why don't you buy it? Don't tell her," because I kind of already knew that if I would have called her like, "Hey, babe, I'm gonna buy these tickets," da da da, she was gonna be automatically no, just shut it down.
Right.
And so when my
Yeah.
friend recommended, she was like, "Why don't you buy the tickets, show her what you learn, and then eventually over time, like she'll kind of see it, and then tell her about the tickets." So that's what I did. I bought the tickets,
Mm.
and this was like I think 6 months in advance. Like it was months in advance, So I
Wow.
bought them,
Yeah.
not letting her know that I had bought them, and then I kept it a secret for a few months.
Yeah. Yeah, and so that's why when he came back, he did start showing me. He was like, "Okay, this is, like
Mhm.
the journal. This is, meditation." And up to this point, again, I didn't know much about it. And so he was like, "Let's try it." And so, my son and I, we were open to it. And I at the beginning it was
Mm.
horrible. I'm like, "Oh my gosh, like who meditates, right? It's so hard to concentrate." But I did see
Yeah.
a difference in him. Like he was just, I guess, more kind of like full of life and more at peace. It was that's kind of how I
Mm.
would like describe it. He was at a peace, and we've been together for a while now, so I could definitely
Yeah.
see that change. And like he said, I gave it a try and try to listen to what he was saying. And there even came a conversation because he was so excited about it. And I said, well, if what if I don't like get on board with this? Like, what if I'm just like, no, like
Mhm.
completely shut out what happened? And do you want to share what?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it was big for me to say it because I don't
Yeah.
like confrontation. So, but at that time, I felt that this is what she needed to hear. And so when she asked, like what
Mhm.
would happen if I don't get on board, like I was honest with her, and I was like, this can affect our relationship, but I have
Wow.
faith that I know that it's not going to, but it can.
Yeah.
Mm.
And he's
Mhm.
right. I did need to hear that. And I'm
Ooh.
like, okay, it's, and again, I think that we have a really strong bond. So it's not immediately like, oh my gosh, he's going to leave me. Like, right. It wasn't those feelings. It was more of like, wow, okay, he's really about this. Like, this means
Yeah.
a lot to him. And if it does mean that much to him, then it's only right that I, as his partner, at least try it. At least try to
Mm.
understand what he's learning, what he's feeling. And yeah, we just kept going through that routine. And one day he told me, he said, I have tickets for the seminar or the retreat in California.
Mm.
Do you want to go? And immediately I was like, yeah, let's do it. And so it it
Wow.
it was that was, I think, right there, the beginning of me like fully like, okay, let me give this a try. Although I do have to say
Mhm.
that I was like, I'll do this just to go prove that it's a cult. So I was like, I'm gonna go,
To prove
I
you
had already
wrong.
planned. Yeah, I was like, okay, I'm gonna call Dateline after it's done. I'm gonna go and like there's gonna be like a show about this cult, but at least I'm gonna go in there and prove to myself that it is, right? Because there's no way that
Mm.
one 3-day seminar or retreat can make somebody
Mhm.
like change their whole perspective of life and how they feel about it. And yeah, so
Mm.
that was just the
Okay.
main the big aha moment where I was like, okay, let me go try something I've never tried
Let me
before or
try
what I
it.
have ever tried.
Wow. Okay. I definitely want to talk about this kind of mini ultimatum because I guess, like you said, it's not like you were saying this or nothing. But was it surrounded around like self development in general? Was it more about like this new routine that you had, like in your, well, for you, Kori, in your mind when you said, "What if I don't get on board?" What was like, what encompassed that?
He came and he was completely different. He's like, okay, like I'm meditating in the morning, I'm meditating at night, I'm journaling, I'm reading, and this was a completely different Nefi than the one that I had been,
Hmm.
used to, married to for this whole time. And because I just didn't understand meditation, I had tried, I laid there and, she would say, oh, picture like, a bright light. And I would just be picturing, something completely different, or I'd be thinking about the grocery list. My mind just wasn't there. And so, for
Yeah.
me, I struggled with that because I'm like, okay, I tried it, but it didn't work. So what now?
Yeah.
And I think just the the array of things that he was trying and the conversations and how he was talking about how he had been able to heal um this really like this part of him that needed healing, all that to me was like, well, this is a lot. And again, coming from like an unhealed version, of myself. I was like, I don't need healing, so why would I go, right? I don't need meditation, so why would I
Mhm.
do it? I don't need to journal
Yeah.
because I don't. So there, that was the mindset that I was in. I'm like, I don't need these things. You may need them. I
Okay.
don't. And so it was hard for me. Like, okay, so
Okay.
if I don't get on board, right? Because I've always done what I wanted to do. And so I'm like, if I don't do this, what happens? Right. And just me, I'm always like, I'd
Okay.
rather be prepared. And that's kind of why
Mm.
that question even arose. I'm like, but when he answered it in that manner, normally just being the person that he is, in a way, I expected him to be like, oh, don't worry about it. Like, we're good. Right. Like nothing's going to
Mhm.
happen. But when he didn't say that, I'm like, wait a minute. Like, I need to pay attention because you know,
Mm.
it's not that he's telling me I don't love you or it's over or it's going to be the end, but he's taking a stance, and he's only taking a stance
Yeah.
because it's so important to him. Right. And so, again,
Mhm.
because it was so important to him, I felt the need to, at the very least, give it time and try it out before I actually said no. Because I feel like at that point I was willing to do that. Like, hey, I tried it out. I'm sorry it just didn't work. I guess we're different people now. We'll, co parent, whatever it is that we need to do. But
Wow. Yeah.
yeah, that was just how that went about.
Yeah. I think what I want to make note of here is like how sometimes that's like self preservation, right? We don't want to change. And how far our minds can go already. So you're like, all right, fine, co parenting then. Like you took it all the way to
Yeah.
protect your mind, like all the things, and you take it all the way there. And we do that as people, where it's like to avoid change or to avoid looking in a direction that maybe we know we need to, but like we're not ready to. I don't know if it's ego or just our minds, like it's protecting us and it creates these scenarios where I'll be fine. Nothing's gonna
Hmm.
I'm good. I don't need that. So yeah, I just want to make note of that because that's what I'm hearing there. It's like protection, basically. Like something
Yeah.
within you was protecting you in some way. And I definitely want to hear from you, Nefi. Like, I imagine that there was, oh, I don't know, maybe there wasn't, but like, was there fear around setting this kind of ultimatum, because it sounds like you're not fully used to that or you don't like to kind of go there. So, yeah, I'm just wondering how did it feel on your end? Because it sounds like it was also something big for your internal self, not just for the
Oh,
relationship, but like for you.
oh, 100%. I feel that that was kind of like the biggest thing. Just like just saying it out loud, because I've always been like that
Mm-hmm.
type of person to please, the people pleaser in us, right? And
Mm,
and even in our
mm-hmm.
relationship, I'm always like, all right, like what do you want? All that stuff. But it did get to the point where I was just like, no, like this needs to be said. So, I felt that that was like me stepping more into like my masculine energy of saying no, like I know
Mm,
this is what I need, and the partner that I want long term can benefit from it. So just going through those emotions, it was hard. And even like I think when I said it, like I was kind of like stuttering a little bit. I was like, what? Kind of thinking about it. But when I said it, it was freeing. It was like, okay, like it
mm,
needed to be said. It's out there. So let's move forward. So but yeah, it
mm-hmm.
was it was difficult to say it, but I knew that it needed to be said.
I see. When we start to go through these internal changes, we kind of feel like we see improvement within ourselves. We want to see that reflected in our outside. And do you feel like that's what was happening? It's like, okay, I'm seeing this and I want this for her, or I need this for her so that I feel good in the relationship. Like, where was it rooting from, if that makes sense?
I think it did start off it did start off kind of like me like wanted this for the relationship, and I think that was kind of where another like ego death kind of came through, because ultimately,
Mm,
yes, I want this for our relationship, I want this in the relationship for us, but ultimately I kind of started thinking like, no, it's not about us, it's about more about me. When we were having that conversation, kind of thinking into like inward, and it's like, no, this is what I want, and what I want in a relationship is A, B, and C. And so even saying that to
mm,
her, knowing that we've been married all these years, saying that the that she's potentially not what I want, it was a little scary because I was like, man, like this could potentially ruin the relationship, but I had to get past that, and I feel that that was like another
Mm.
like ego death of me just letting go of that thought and just moving forward
Yeah.
with it.
Yeah, and again, thank you guys so much for being open and vulnerable because I don't think those phases were easy, like even just saying it or like going back to that, I think that it's like these moments where it could have broken, right? What you guys had built for so long. And it takes a lot of courage to name something that maybe is okay enough. That was also another moment donde te pudiste haber aguantado and kept it as is and be like, okay, she's just not into it, me aguanto. But you had to make that decision of like, no, this is what I need, and kind of even betting on a perceived future. And that's not easy to do, as you're shifting from people pleasing to becoming your own like authentic self essentially and owning your what I call your inner poder, but
Mhm.
that's what you were
Yeah,
doing. You were like, all
yeah.
right, I found my voice. I'm going to use it. And
Mhm.
that's scary. And I imagine in a relationship, even more so. So I guess maybe after this, it sounds like the retreat was a pivotal moment. What was like another important piece of the puzzle?
I think that was just the big moment. Being in that space where like something is missing. Like, what is it? What is it? Right? It was, I think, a lot easier
Mm-hmm.
for me to then decide, okay, I'm seeing the change. I like the change. He's a lovely person. We're talking about other things. He's opening up my eyes to other topics, other point of views. Why not try it out? Like what do I have to lose at this point, right? If I feel like I'm missing
Mm-hmm.
something, I don't know what it is. Let me just go, to this retreat. At the very least, I'll be in Palm Springs, you know, like a little mini road trip. So that
Yeah.
that that was the big moment, and from there is just kind of, I think, up to this point, habían pasado like, I don't know, like 2 years or 3 years maybe.
I think so.
Where since
Mm-hmm.
like he had started all this, and by the time we showed up to that retreat, I think that was again the second big moment where everything really changed, where everything was like, whoa, what was this? And how do I go
Mm-hmm.
about, breaking this apart? What does it mean? Where do I go from here? Um, I want
Mm-hmm.
more of this feeling because it felt really good. And how do I stay here?
So then once that happened, then you were like, okay, I see kind of what you're seeing and I want to continue in this direction, it sounds like.
Yeah. Yeah. I saw that you know, I was broken. I was, not this healed person that I thought I was, that, try
Mm.
to, that I had been up until that point. I realized, I'm like, wait, I'm not as strong as I think I am. I do need help. I do need a lot of healing to do. And just realizing that was, I think, the big difference, where it finally clicked on what he
Mm.
had been doing this whole time. He had been telling me, and
Mhm.
I had been seeing it, but I couldn't really fully understand it until it happened to me. And again, I think that first day of the retreat, I was still in that negative space. I was like, this guy is just talking nonsense. And
Yeah.
the second day, after, because we went with some friends as well, and that
Mm.
first day, after they were kind of debriefing after it was over, we were having dinner, and then they were saying about the things that they felt during the day, and I'm like, well, I didn't feel any of these things because I was just so caught up in the trying to prove this is a cult, right? I'm so proud of like trying to like
Yeah.
take any words that this man was saying, and like, that's not true. And yes, there was a lot
Mhm.
of things that he said that I don't agree with, but then at the same time he
Mhm.
was speaking a lot of truth. And I think I just had a little like moment of awakening when I was like, you know what, I'm here, let me give it a real shot, let me give it a real genuine shot to see if this is actually true. And
Yeah.
because when I was there, they do like towards the end of the day, they'll do like, I guess like it's a big meditation, guided meditation, where he guides you. And people
Mm-hmm.
were people were crying, people were yelling, people were sobbing, people, and then
Mm.
so that first day I'm like, oh my gosh, like this is for real a cult. But
Cult. Yeah.
exactly, yeah, because you're trying to
Yeah.
lay there and people are like yelling and saying things,
Yeah.
and you're like, what is this? But the
Mm-hmm.
second day, where when we reached that point of the meditation again, I tried my hardest, and I didn't know how I did it, but at the end, I ended up like crying too. I mean, I wasn't yelling, but I was crying because of the experience I had felt within that meditation. I had healed, I didn't
Yeah.
heal, but you know, I I came face to face with the hidden parts of me that I never wanted to acknowledge. And one of those, just to be like,
Mm-hmm.
fully open here, is my father was never in my life. My biological father was never in my life. And
Mm-hmm.
I grew up not necessarily missing a father because I had lots of love for my grandparents, my uncles, everybody. But I realized then that it still affected me, whether
Mm.
I wanted to or not. And so in this particular meditation, I was able to kind of have a vision of what that felt like or what that meant. And
Wow.
it brought up all these
Yeah.
emotions and feelings that had never kind of dealt with or allowed to surface. And I think
Yeah.
just that, however long it was, 30 minutes maybe, um, ignited this like fire within me to be like, okay, like I saw that, I want to heal that. And it can't just
Mm-hmm.
be that little part of my life that was wrong and everything else is good, right? There has to be so much more that I
Mm.
need to like work on. And it makes you feel good to realize that you actually are a little flawed, like we try to sometimes, show the best versions of ourselves at all times. And
Yeah.
it could be that we end up believing ourselves. We're like, oh, see, like, yo no tengo problemas, I'm good, because we're trying to show the best versions of ourselves. But in reality, you can't really lie to yourself. You're always going to like know that that's not the truth. And this servicing in that aspect was the big eye opener. And that's when I was like, oh my gosh, this man was right. Like,
Mm.
he understood that I needed this in a way that
Mm-hmm.
I didn't even know I needed. And then,
Yeah.
it and at that point I think we came even closer together,
Yeah.
because also
Yeah.
within that meditation, or the next day I believe, they did one where like it's about letting go and forgiveness, right? And so I was able to forgive him for, not that he had done anything bad, but for what I thought I needed to forgive him for.
Mm-hmm.
And again, that kind of gave us a clean slate, and we picked up right there
Mm.
again. Like I felt like stronger than we were when we even started all this.
Wow.
Mhm.
Yeah. How powerful. And thank you so much for adding that layer of depth to what you experienced, because it's not as black and white as like I just didn't want to heal and he did, right? It never is that simple. That's the
Mhm.
thing. And that's what I continuously learn through this work. It's like there's so many layers to it all, And I know, Kori, that you are also like high achieving and that you had to be really strong and independent and go-getter, and all of that requires sometimes hiding those parts of us that hurt, because otherwise you wouldn't get to where you're wanting to go,
Yeah.
and I think it's so valid and so common in first gens, in our like parents generation too, because there's like a goal, there's like already a where I need to get there no matter what, and I don't have time to pause and put ointment in this like
Right.
wound, porque I'm running, so I don't have time to pause. And so thank you for naming that, because that's sometimes what happens. It's not like, oh, I'm just stubborn, and I just don't wanna. Like it's gonna require some vulnerability, and sometimes we feel like that's gonna slow us down or it's gonna put us back. Um, and it takes courage, to be like, okay, fine, I'll finally like open up to that. So kudos to you too
Absolutely.
for
Yeah.
going there. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Like I said, so grateful for you guys being willing to share these parts and go there. And it feels really beautiful to have you guys as a couple together. I don't typically have, two people on, but it's just like so weaved in so beautifully, like how we started off, and you could interpret it one way. And now even the listeners have such a different experience of what maybe they're going through. So I think, like, maybe to start wrapping up the episode, I would like to ask you guys if there's any advice. It could be related to everything we've talked about, or maybe just something that pops in for couples navigating this.
Yeah, I think for me, the biggest advice I would give somebody that is going through that situation is just to keep going. Don't stop. Because I feel that even during that journey, like there was times where like this is tiring, like this is emotional, this is hard. It's something that
Mm,
should I be doing this? So you do question yourself. So I feel for someone
yeah.
who truly does want to heal and wants to go down that journey, just to keep going. Don't stop and try to find that community. It might be online, it could be, and even sometimes it could be strangers that we don't even know. But really try to find that community and finding out your why. Like, why do you want to heal? Why do you want to better yourself? And then once you
Mhm.
find that, just hold on to it and just keep pushing forward. And I think the biggest part is not giving up. Like they say, trust the process. And
Mhm.
always keep in mind to just all you need is to be 1% better each day. 1%, that's all it takes. Because over time that 1% does add up. So if anybody ever feels like this might have not been for them, just know that there's a lot of people out there in the same situations and that you're not alone. And be open to new experience, to new ideas, and having the right mindset to really push through it.
Yeah, to keep going. I think also I wonder, like, it sounds like you saw merit to focusing on yourself, right? So if they're in a space where maybe their partner isn't there yet, do you have any advice there? Because I actually reached out to the community on TikTok and I was like, hey, do you guys have questions for, I'm going to be interviewing a couple in regards to this topic. And someone there was like, the fear is paralyzing, like the fear of, am I going to change so much that I won't be able to connect with my partner? And then someone else had mentioned, like, I gave I think it was like a couple year ultimatum, so kind of like setting similar, right? Like setting an expectation. So I'm just wondering, putting yourself in like, someone's navigating that right now. Do you have any advice in regards to that?
It's scary, like even when we had that conversation, like there was a couple times where like, ooh, like this could be hit, but just knowing that love and that trust is there, and that this person is truly the person you want to be with, there's nothing that's going to be able to stop you. And give it time. I feel that healing journey does take time. And it's never ending. I feel that each day we're still
Yeah.
learning from it, and even though we've been on this path for so long, like every day is a new day, and you continue to learn and you continue to grow. But if for someone who's scared, I feel kind of goes back to one of my favorite quotes, where the best things in life are on the other side of fear. So if you really want that and
Mm,
you're that scared, it's because it's going to be that much better on the other side once you get through
I love that. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Corey. So, yeah, do you have advice to share to the listeners?
I think the first thing would be follow your gut. It's not gonna lead you astray. Like for me, there was something that was missing, right? And I didn't know what it was, but I kept on kind
Mhm.
of, sticking to that and trying to find what it was. And sometimes you will do things that are not going to be it, right? But the fact that you
Mhm.
tried it makes you one step closer to finding what you're really looking for. That, like Nefi says, that feeling of amazingness and goodness and happiness and fulfillment, like you will find it. You just gonna have to do the work, right? Unfortunately, it's
Mm.
not something that you could just go to school for and be like, okay, now I'm happy or I found it. You have to put in the work. And so you're gonna have to follow your gut every step of the way, and trust that you will get there. because, again, speaking from experience, had I just ignored it and be like, oh, whatever, I'm good where I'm at, I don't think we'd be doing this right now. We wouldn't be sitting here with you
Mm,
talking about how we overcame that, and how our healing journey and higher self seeking journey has been, because
yeah.
it's just that it's just so easy. It's easier to give up, honestly, right? So definitely follow your gut. I think I did want to touch on something that I think one of the questions you said was, the ultimatum. Um,
Mhm.
Time again is just man-made, right? It's just a human construct. There, yeah, you can say a year, you can say 2 years, but you don't know how long you need to heal, to find that aha moment like we did. It took
Mhm.
you how long?
At least 2 years, I would say.
At
Like,
least 2 years,
yeah.
but essentially something that you were looking for, who knows, even
Oh yeah.
previous, right? So what, like 20 something years to even realize, wait, I want something more out of life. And so
I
when
see,
we're
yeah.
dealing with couples, it's, we are sharing a life, we are sharing our dreams, our hopes, everything. You're kind of, committed to this person. And so if you truly do feel that that's the right person for you, and you're willing to take a chance, you're willing to um, bet on this person, then allow them to do that, without necessarily saying, okay, you have 6 months to change, or you have a year to prove to me
Mm,
that you've changed. Because at the end of the day,
yeah.
we need to realize that any changes that we do are only going to be for ourselves. And yes, he changed and I get to enjoy it, and I get to see like this beautiful person that he's grown into, but he is living with that person every day. When he goes to work and I'm not there, he's still with
Mhm.
that person. When, we're not
Mhm.
around, he's still with that person. And so that change ultimately has to be for you and no one else. And when you can
Yeah.
definitely put that apart and say, okay, I'm going to change for me, and I would hope that you do it for you, and I will be here to support you. I think that's going to make the difference. It surely did for
Yeah.
us, and I know everybody's different, but that surely was the difference for us. I was able to see him grow and become this beautiful person, and at the same time, I was like, I don't want to be left behind, right? I don't want to be sitting here sulking and being miserable when I can also be experiencing that thing. And so I was, trying to catch up to him in whichever ways that I could. And thankfully I did. And now our journey is kind of, we often talk about it. We go, he kind of elevates, and then I catch up, and then I elevate, and then he catches up. And so we're still at different levels in our journey, but we're
Mhm.
still very much together in them and supportive of each other. So I think at the end,
Mm,
do it for yourself, and do it with, the intention and the just be genuine about it, and you can't go
yeah.
wrong.
Wow. Ooh, thank you so much for bringing that in as well. Do it for you, So even if you do have that partner that you're seeing is evolving and you feel like you need to catch up, recognize like if I'm going to go in on that, it's for me, not just for them. And if you're the couple or the first one in the couple to start evolving, to start changing, also recognize that it's for you and that if they change, it's for them. So recognizing like the reason we want to both be on the same page is to experience maybe a deeper connection or more vulnerability and authenticity amongst each other. Yeah, thank you
Hmm.
for bringing that also into the conversation. I want to mention that you guys have a podcast of your own. So if
Yes.
you would like to share where people can follow along and hear more about your stories individually, I guess, and as a relationship, feel free to plug yourselves, and then we'll close out today's episode.
Yeah. So we host a podcast called Everything But Perfect, which I think speaks perfectly to our relationship and to most relationships out there. And you can listen to it on all platforms: Spotify, Apple Podcasts. And I really want to invite you to listen from the beginning towards the end, because you will
Mm.
also see how our relationship evolved. We just talked about some of the things,
Mm.
that we uh, kind of went through here, but in there, we kind of talk a little bit more in detail about it. But then, yeah, you definitely see the growth of the before Cory and Nefi, and then the after Cory and Nefi, of the healing that we've done thus far. And we
Mhm.
are starting a new season in which we are talking a lot more about the spiritual journey as it relates to individuals
Mm.
and how we can show up as best in all our relationships. So hopefully you can find
Mm.
some, value in those conversations as well.
Awesome. So it's everything but perfect, and it will be linked in the description of this episode. And yeah, thank you both so much for being here, for sharing your stories, for being open, because like I said, we need, I think, real examples, and as we're navigating this, and as it maybe, like, if you're in that position where you can't talk to your partner about, like, this is what I'm seeing, maybe seeing it reflected in a couple helps, see, okay, this is a potential outcome, and this is potentially how, let's say, I can be open-minded about it, patient with it, communicate it, so all of these things, I think, through hearing your story today, will be helpful to picture a potential
Yeah.
outcome,
Yeah.
and a potential way of navigating it.
Yeah.
So yeah, thank you guys so much.
We want to thank you too. Thank you for inviting us. I think this is, again, everything happens for a reason. And through the work that we've been doing, it's only probably the best time now that we can talk about it, and kind of in
Mm,
a way that's not hurtful or, angering or anything like that, but more of like, wow, like we really did overcome something big. And
mhm,
I think it's, instead of comparing ourselves to the Kardashians and all that stuff, like it's like you just mentioned, it's a lot like better to try to learn from real couples that are actually going through
yeah,
stuff and are trying to work things out.
yeah,
Yeah, and I also wanted to
definitely.
say, thank you for having us on here. I've been following you for a long time, and I'm a big fan. Your work is awesome, and I just wanted to say thank you, and to even having a safe space for people to come on and talk about it, because I feel that sometimes this topic could be taboo, or as whatever
Mhm,
you want to call it, but in reality, these conversations are the ones that we need to have to continue our growth, also not just individually but also as a collective. So, and I feel that you're
yeah.
you're 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 being a trailblazer, and you're doing an amazing job, so keep going, Priscilla.
Mm. Thank you. Thank you. All right, you guys. Well, thank you so much for tuning in. If you found this episode helpful, please make sure that you share it with your amigas, amigos, amigues. And remember, first gen, that I love you, I love me, and I can't wait for you to love yourself. Bye.